And we're live. Welcome back to the Weekly Roundup. Holy cow, we're almost at Halloween. And my favorite holiday, Dia de los Muertos, November 2nd is when it is. If you are ever looking for like a weird time to run a yoga retreat, I think you should run it over Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, because it's like, it's hard to even explain how cool it is. It's somehow a mix between like a party slash a celebration of life wake situation slash a little bit sad, but also not. And everyone does it publicly. Like people have altars in their houses, but they just put it in their front yard. So like everyone's like airing their family history of death and stuff too. I can't even, that's the best, it's a terrible explanation, but, and everything's beautiful. They have these beautiful flowers everywhere. Like it's really, really cool. But anyways, this time of year, the reason I'm saying that is, other than good time to run a yoga retreat, I think that this entire event, this entire holiday is something that to me is exciting, in part because it has a tone to it. And the tone is something it's like tangible, but it's hard to explain it, because tone is not something obviously that like, it's not necessarily something you explain. It's a deeper detail. And it really made me think of, I was speaking with a bunch of studio owners at their annual general meeting for a brand just this last week. It's why I've been away. And we were talking a lot about tone. We were talking about how, as you guys know, 55% of communication is body language. 7% of communication are the words that you say. It's 38% of it is the tone. And right now we have to realize that body language is subdued because a lot of the conversation is not happening face to face. It's happening digital, and it's happening email, and it's happening phone. So there is tone in terms of what you do with your voice when you're actually speaking. And it's why video and even voice drop is actually really powerful, because you can express tone better. But tone does, there is a thought process, there is a tone through all of the stuff you put out there, like how you write, for example. So one of the things that I thought, or that had come up that I thought was important to bring up today was just, there's a lot of marketing ads out there. There's a lot of social media posts that we're seeing studios put up. There's a lot of their website. And at the initial inception of the website, there was probably some thought around like the type of voice, the tone, but I'm not sure that studios that effectively sort of really stick to it. And it made me realize that the studios that do, if you're always writing things, K Studio is one of the best actually I can think of, that like Kay and Orlo's personality just comes through all of the messages that they put out there, and it's funny and quirky and like a little bit weird, but like still understandable. But it was so consistent. That was the tone of the studio, and it like became known for that thing. Whereas if you have sort of conflicting tones all the time, then it doesn't necessarily have a negative impact, but you subdue the memorability of your messaging. So I'm not really sure what my major point is. Look at the tone and this stuff. But I guess the first step is like, is it defined for you and your team? Like, what's the actual tonal way? Oh, I've got one other example for this. There was a restaurant in Vancouver. I think this happened in a few places in the world, sort of around the same era. But there's a restaurant in Vancouver that got quite popular because everyone who worked there was rude to the customers on purpose. You'd go in, and the server would come up and be like, "Hey, do you guys want some water?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, sure." "Well, the cart's over there. Go get it yourself." And then they'd walk away. Like, it was just like, but every single employee in that place, including like the person mopping the floor, would be like, "Don't step on where I just mopped." Like everybody doing anything played into this game in this tone. And that literally was how they built the whole business. I couldn't even tell you if the food is good. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. That's not why you went there. I think it was good, but like, yeah, that's the other best example I can think of other than K Studio too. Go ahead there, Vicky.
Yeah, so this is something that I've worked on with with my own studio. When it comes to all the social media that we put out, that I really wanted it to have a kind of not a super specific tone, but definitely there are things that weren't acceptable, and it needed to follow a certain line, a certain tone. I think it's difficult to have, if it's like different people creating content, each person are gonna have something slightly different. So if I'm creating the content from scratch, it's gonna sound like me a little bit. If I have someone else, it's gonna sound a little bit like them, but I still want it to be in line with the studio's message and the studio's tonality. So the most effective tool that I found for that was to use Asana task management system for all of our social media. So I've had 2 different social media people over the years creating content for me, and they just put everything that they write on Asana, and I go through every single post. It really doesn't take long. They do it in batches for like a whole week. It takes me like maybe half an hour to go through them all and just kind of, mess around a little bit so that I get it exactly the way I want it to sound. And in time, they just kind of learn to write like that.
Right. Eventually, like you earn enough sort of confidence in what they're doing, then you don't have to check, sort of thing is the path.
Absolutely. This is actually what I was going to say as well, Vicky. That's how we did our social media too. And it's exactly what happened, is that I would go through and like edit, because like everybody's got a different kind of voice that they naturally write with. And our social media assistant, and what she did not have a very similar voice to mine, and what our kind of studio tone already had been established as. So I would go through and edit. And then after like a couple of months of doing that, she was able to pick up, okay, like these are the kind of words we use. These are the kind of emojis we use. And that's the other thing I wanted to throw out there, is like, if you're trying to affect your tone in written language, emojis are a great tool to put in your social media posts and your emails. And also like mess with, the not like the capitalization and the spacing and stuff like that in your emails. A great tool that Josh actually taught me is like, when you write an email or a website page, any block of text or a social media post, like read it out loud to yourself. And does it actually sound the way you want it to sound? We know that conversational tone in general, like regardless of your style, is much more impactful than like something that seems formal when you're writing to people these days. So definitely reading out loud, throw those emojis in and like mess with the caps and the punctuation and stuff like that. And that will really help.
Another tip is, and this doesn't have to do with tone or anything, it has to do with editing, is once you've got it, read it backwards. Because then you'll spot, this is a good editing technique, because if you've written it and you've read it, your brain is already 2 or 3 words ahead of what you're reading, right? And you'll oftentimes skip over words that are misspelled or missing words. So if you read it backwards, then if there are errors, they will leap out at you, right? So yeah, that's just a really good little tip, just to make sure to read it backwards to see if there's anything that's misspelled. I actually found something on a major company's website the other day that was misspelled, and it was just flipping 2 letters, right? And this was on a pretty well established brand. I was like, whoa, somebody didn't really edit this very well.
I'd say 50% of the time I see the word meditation, it's spelled as mediation.
Yeah.
At least 50% of the time.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's a very, very tricky one. Yeah.
I had one more tip to throw in. Kay reminded me, after you write, to read it out loud, but there are many paths to the same goal, and what works for some people something that works for someone doesn't work for someone else. And one thing that I found that worked really well for me is to start with the audio. So I would use like a dictation tool, and I would just say what I wanted to write, and then the dictation tool would type it out for me. And then I could go in and edit, because sometimes that staring at a blank piece of paper, you don't know where to start. So just talking and letting the dictation tool pick it up and then editing from there can be really, really helpful too.
My
think
one
that's a
other
really
point
great
would
tip.
be to make sure that your tone is in alignment with your core values and not in conflict with them, to make sure that it all, appears cohesive.
That makes sense to me. Can you give an example of what not aligned with your core values would be?
I would say,
understand.
like, I know a
what
lot
you're
of people, which
suggesting.
I
I'm just thinking
really
what that
love,
is.
are adding in like fun, or like just the idea of having fun and like the importance of fun in their business or their own personal core values. And if your tone sounds like it was written from, a business thesis, or it's very dry, or it's just not fun, then it's just not in alignment. It doesn't support that. Or like one that I'm very sensitive about is, for my own studio, one of our core values is always be the student. And if I'm presenting stuff from this, like, high level, I'm the teacher, I know everything, and which just absolutely drives me batty, then I'm not being the student. I'm not coming from the place of learning, and that we're all students if we're really practicing yoga.
Yeah, I like that. So you would I could see what you're saying. You could rewrite it a little bit. You're right. Or the reverse, actually. I was just thinking as you were suggesting, Jennifer, I see a lot where people actually, their natural writing style is actually very comical. Like they write in a funny way. They have good insertion of like randomness, but then that isn't their core values. Like they don't focus there or whatever. So
yeah, the other thing that I find people struggle with writing and owning a business in general is, are you the business? I mean, is your personality the business personality? Like, how do you separate those two things? So, I mean, for me, I'm irreverent. I use dirty words. I like to drink. Like, I'm like not like a traditional like yogi type person. Like from outwardly, inwardly, I'm like a combination of all of that stuff. But like when I'm writing my own stuff just for me, or speaking just as me, it's different than the voice of my studio. Now, is my own personality like infused into the studio's tone? Yes, but it's not the same. It's not the same as, I mean, I am not my studio. So you have to really kind of be self-aware in that way, and how, and that goes to, like, I have my own personal core values. I have core values as a coach, and I have core values that is part of my studio, and they're all a little bit different. So it's just being aware of, I just thinking about that stuff. A lot of times when we decide to open a business, we're like, oh, wow, there's no yoga studios in the neighborhood. Like, I'm totally going to open one. That'd be really easy. And it's going to be a yoga studio, just like every other yoga studio I've ever seen. And you don't really take the time, to think about, what is the tone? What do I want to present? What are my values? Like, and how are they different and also the same as me, as the owner, or completely different? Yeah. Some people have their ownership in a silo, and then they have their business. There's no right or wrong, but just being aware and asking yourself those questions.
I think it's a powerful point in general for business, because I mean, actually, we had totally had this conversation during these AGM that I was at as well, where just in theory, for the total capacity and total impact of your business to grow to its maximum potential, can't hinge just on you. Therefore, even in the inception of the whole thing, you have to realize that it is a separate entity from yourself. If it's not a separate entity from yourself, that's not wrong, but it means you've purchased yourself a job. And if that's your intention, that's great. The problem is, it's very often not the owner's intention, or there was just no real thought about it. Like, because we all know the first studios we opened up, it's like, you just open the doors and figure it out, and then you sort it out later. But tone would be part of this too. Core values would be part of this too. And actually, this is a great segue, I think, to something Vicky was, I know, going to bring into the mix here today. But just when you define things in your business external from yourself, including your business's values, including your business's tone, it becomes a filter for you. It also becomes a filter and a guideline for everybody else that you're going to work within the business or hire around the business. And I think that is often a sticky point. Vicky will let you sort of jump in here, but when you go to hire, especially externally, if you don't have these things defined, then they create something for you. And when it comes back, you're like, that's not us. The problem is, do you have a white paper that you gave them that says this is us? So if we didn't give them those clear guidelines, can they actually produce what we want? Vicky, let me spin it over to you.
Yeah, so the situation that I had was with a coaching client, and they wanted to bring in more first timers, just more first visits. That was, from what I could tell, this was one of their goals, and they had been using kind of a marketing company. I don't know if they were specifically coaching, but more like marketing within the fitness industry. So I know that a lot of studios are struggling a little bit with bringing in first timers. It seems to be something that's shifted after COVID, that we're not seeing as many first visits anymore. So it's quite common that we try and do something about this. Like, what do we do? Get them in. The advice that this owner had been given was this company had set up an ad campaign for them, and the ad campaign was like $1,000 per month spent on ads, and they were promised, oh, you're gonna see at least like 200 new people through the door a month. We've done this so many times. There was a whole team behind this. They've done this within the fitness world. They say that you're going to see all these people, and then all you need is this like really solid process for actually getting them to come in for that class and then selling them something. So this studio, they have like a fairly, they have a system for that. They are doing it. They're doing the work there. They have a sales process, and they have a follow-up process. And right now I'm kind of struggling with what advice to give them, because it's not been very long. It's only been about 3 weeks. And in the words of the owner, the results are pathetic. So they say like 48 leads, 4 visits. And it's been almost a month of $1,000 spent on ads. And I feel for them, because that's a lot of money spent on ads, especially, if things are tough. That's a lot of money that seem a little bit like it's wasted. So,
Vicky, are they in the ad? What are they offering? Just curious.
So that's maybe the first thing I should have said. The ad is first class is free. So this is the discussion that I've had before, and that I've kind of tried, and I am currently trying it for my own studio, a little bit as an experiment. I've talked about this before in the roundup. I did this in the summer, but it was like a whole week for free. So there's a difference between having your first class is always free, or your first week is always free as an intro. These are models that Terry talked about in her really excellent webinar that you should watch, about, if intros that she did a few months ago. So this is not an intro, this is a campaign. And the campaign is you get the first class for free. And then we try and sell you something. What I've tried for my own studio, I'm still trying, is the first week is free. So the struggle there is A, getting them into class when they sign up for the offer, and then B, selling them something when they're actually come for a visit. So I ran a little bit like numbers that I have so far, and I don't have a lot. I was running this for 6 weeks in June. I had 50 people buy the offer. 30 of them actually visited, which I thought pretty good. And then 10 bought something. They bought like a first month half price. But that's like, I probably spent also $1,000 on this. So in terms of acquiring new clients, that's incredibly expensive. I consider that to be really, really expensive.
That was $100 per client.
Yeah. Is that normal? I don't know. Like, this is where I want to go to you, other coaches. Like, what is it? What is a reason?
Are they still members today from the summer? Are those 10 still retained?
I only have numbers that they bought the first month half price, so probably not. You know, I count on like maybe 40% retention from that. So I didn't actually get 10. I got like maybe 4. So that's expensive acquiring those people.
I would go. Can you go and find those numbers for us, Vicky, afterwards? That would be super interesting to be like that exact group.
Yeah,
Who kept going afterwards, and then what's the total amount of dollars across all of them brought in? Because that's what I was going to say. Like the actual metric here is a lifetime value metric. $100 to acquire a client sounds like a lot, but it isn't if your average lifetime value is $1,000.
My average lifetime value is 6.5 months.
Mm-hmm. So $700 ish, let's call it, for rounding. So yeah, I mean, cost of acquisition. Here's a thought. Okay, I know you had your hand up here too, so I'm sure you've got more to add into this. It's first off, I'm going to say this, and it's going to be counter to what you've said, but not because I'm countering you, but because there's like a big paradigm shift in digital advertising, right? $1,000 a month is not a lot of money in digital ads world. It's peanuts. So it doesn't mean you have to spend all this money. You have to be intelligent about it. But there is like a narrative that everyone, I think, needs to be aware of like what we think is a lot of money. If you buy a $6,000 computer for your studio, you're like, it sucks to have that expense, but I have to do it. If you pay your teachers 30 to 40% of the gross income of the studio and you're doing $500,000, like we have hundreds of thousands of dollars going out. We're like, well, that's a big expense, but like I have to do it. If we do a continuing education course and we spend about, thousands of dollars on it, we're like, well, I need to do this. Marketing is the one place in the yoga world that I see often people are like, $50, I don't know. Like we're really tight on that specific budget. Compounding that is the fact that we talk a lot in the YC around marketing is the only budget that you're trying to spend more. Every other budget, you're trying to get the cost lower. In marketing, you're trying to spend more money. You're trying to prove out an efficiency where when you put $5 in, $10 come back. If you can get confident that will happen, we always make the joke. If I say, you give me $1 and I'll give you $5, how many dollars will you give me? Like, if you're really confident it's going to happen, as many dollars as you can possibly give me. There's a time lag around it. It's the same idea with like investing and stuff like that too. That's a whole nother tangent, but conceptually it's like a little bit weird. And while I'm on the rant, we know with marketing too, there's a lag of effect. Whatever you're experiencing in your business right now is the accumulative effect of your last 3 to 6 months of effort. So specific to the person that we're talking about in starting this 3 weeks, the ads, I don't know, are they on Facebook? What was the platform that they're being run on?
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
With Facebook and Instagram right now in the ads manager, your ads don't even season for 2 weeks. It like sometimes longer. So it's unlikely anything's optimized. It's unlikely there's been enough residual result. It's unlikely people have had the ads in front of them enough. To say that it's working, we couldn't say that either. To say that it's not working, it might be unfair to say that at this point in time. Now, admittedly, $1,000 a month, despite being small and digital ad world, is a lot of money out of a business. I would just suggest, though, that we have to invest in marketing somewhere. So sometimes it's a question of like, if we're not spending $1,000 a month in ads, where are you spending $1,000 a month in marketing effort that's driving a result? Like, show me something better. And what ends up happening is we just do nothing. Because the other thing with ads is it's really hard to track, and it's because of how people register into most yoga studios. It doesn't matter if you're using Mind Body, Mariana Tech, Wellness Living, Walla, Moments, any of them, literally any of them, the tracking, we can't pixel track it properly. And also behaviorally, that's not really what people do, right? Like, I could see your ad 15 times and then come in and you're like, how did you hear about us? I'm like, Kay told me. So it's also an impression game. Anyways, there's a lot to unpack there, but those are my quick thoughts. Just that this is a tricky one. Okay, I'll let you pipe in and then let's keep going. I think there's a few rabbit holes we can go down here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it could be too early to tell. And there is that issue where people will not, it's difficult to track whether your social media ads actually brought people in. You can't just say, well, this many people clicked and purchased online, because that's not necessarily what they're going to do. But Josh already said that. So anyway, but what I do want to say is that I've heard from several clients recently and over the years too, like, they go and hire marketing companies like your client, Vicky, a marketing company who's experienced in the fitness or gym industry, or even in the yoga industry, but they're online marketers. And as Josh was saying, maybe before we got on the call, like marketers are good at marketing. They're good at selling you on hiring them to do your marketing. And it's very tempting when we're like, oh my gosh, okay, $1,000 ad spend. I want to make sure I have a professional managing this so that I get the results I want. However, just because they're a professional doesn't mean that they know your business or your industry well enough to actually do effective ads for you. So there's a big difference between like really good at advertising for the shoe company and really good at advertising for the yoga studio. So my experience, we hired a digital marketing firm. I heard them on a podcast and I was like super impressed with them and like, okay, so I'm going to go for it. And I had not actually been putting any money behind marketing our online studio. And it was doing fine. So I wanted to see what would happen when I put some money out there. And they also encouraged me to spend about $1,000 a month. That's just the ad spend, right? That's not hiring them. But what they charge may be, I mean, they gave me a deal and it was less than 1,000, but not much. So you may be paying an agency $1,000 and then also your ad spend is $1,000. Where I agree with Josh that like you do need to spend money on that ad spend to actually see the results. However, you may not need to spend that much money on an agency to manage your ads. So definitely if you're going to hire someone, monitor what they're doing. For example, we have online Bikram yoga classes. When I first looked at what they set up, they misspelled Bikram. So that was a problem, right? And they also like didn't, leave out of exclude from the Google search many things that are necessary to exclude so that we don't get people who are just looking up Bikram Chowdhury. So you need to like, that's because they're pros, but they don't know my industry. So really important to monitor that. And then also like, look at the quality of ads they're making, because like chances are you and your coach can put together something much better that's actually going to reach the students that you want, that will actually come into your studio and become members. So I would encourage you to spend more on the ad spend and spend less on the agencies and just work on it with your coach.
Yeah, that's actually like my one big takeaway that I've written down before we started talking even was like one big learning thing is make your own ads. It's not that hard. Like you and any of your coaches can help you with this. And then the other thing was what Josh was saying about your ad spend now, the fallout is going to happen 3 months later. So there are reasons why it's worth it running ads, just running ads. There's something like, I don't know, there's probably like a term for it, something like collateral damage or fallout, but positive. I don't know if anyone can think about the word.
What's like, the positive wording for collateral damage?
Yeah, like people see an ad for this like free class.
Collateral impact.
Yeah, collateral impact, something like they see this ad for this free class and they're like, oh yeah, they don't do anything. But then they're like, I know I saw this, like there was a yoga studio close to my office. They look it up and then they go on the website and buy the intro. So it's like, the ad made them do it. So yeah, that's collateral impact maybe.
Yeah,
we coined the phrase, you heard it here first.
It could be that they don't even buy. Like this is why Mira and I have talked about this back and forth a bit. Like often yoga studios will target ads towards just women. And unless you're a women only yoga studio, that's simply because the majority of your students may be women. But I'm a big fan of don't do that, like because their husband who knows they're looking for a yoga class may see your ad because he's on YouTube more, or dudes also need yoga, even just because the majority of your clientele, and Alex and I were talking about this the other day too. It's like all in what you put out there. If you're only sending it to women, like you might only get women, and then
Well, also that data point.
Yeah, go ahead.
That data point, Kay, is an example of what you were saying before of the agency not understanding the industry. That metric of more women than men doing yoga, that's 10 years old. It's just fucking not true anymore. Newsflash, men do yoga, like a lot of them. In fact, pretty much 50-50 at this point, if we blend it across the industry. It leans a little bit female, but not much. So yeah, it's straight wrong. Unless you're running an ad that says, hey, women, come do this yoga class, like unless the ad copy itself is specifically targeting someone that specific, then you would target down to it. But I totally agree. Jennifer, jump in there. I got lots to say, but I'll wait.
Yeah. So three things come to mind here. One, like this goes back to tone. Like, you know, a lot of times you hire an agency, unless you spend a lot of time with them, they don't necessarily know your tone. So if you're clear on your tone, you're clear on your avatars, you're clear on your messaging and who you want to attract. Hey, if you want to say, hey, women that are going through menopause, like come to my studio. Like, you know, we also want to cast some very specific ads as well, right? To call in the people. If we know who we want to call in, then we can be very specific in our ads and be very clear with our tone. Because, you know, I know for me, when I'm looking through stuff, a lot of the stuff is just very vanilla and that just does not resonate with me. But sometimes if I see something that speaks to me specifically, like I am on it because I'm like, oh, that's totally me. That's what I've been looking for. Number two, a lot of times what I found historically when I first opened my studio was I was so intimidated by placing ads. I just wanted to find somebody to help me do it. Like I had this big imposter syndrome and I knew I needed to get it done, but I had looked at it and I tried to figure it out. And I just felt like I was going to do it wrong. And I really just wanted to give it to someone and then trust that they were going to do it for me. And I did that. And it was a big disaster. The person was not the right person. And it was a big waste of time and energy. And then not only did I waste time, energy, and money, then I felt bad about myself. Like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible owner. Like I just trusted this person and I should have known, or I should have looked. So there's like all this like emotion and guilt wrapped up in it. And then the third thing, when you're looking at your cost of acquisition in ads, if you do hire someone, you have to add in that cost as well. So, you know, that really, if you spend $1,000 and you spend $1,000, you know, on the person, now you're spending $2,000 a month, which is great. I mean, we talked about how, you know, we probably need to be, you know, spending whatever we need to spend to get these people in, but just really putting the correct numbers in when you're looking at what you get. So, I mean, my suggestion is get your budget set, and then watch Vicky's 2 webinars on the YC, and, you know, do it yourself. Like watch through it. Like she really, really lays it out, and try that first before you go out and hire someone, unless another yoga studio owner told you, I hired this agency, they did a great job, this is how much it costs, and this is how much I got back. I think be very, very careful about just rando marketers coming for you that promise you things without guarantees.
Well, and also just to interject there, like we have social media whiz Mara for your Facebook and Instagram ads. She only does yoga studios. I work directly with her on doing it. Like her shit's proven. And she's going to be the first one that'll tell you, like, we're not putting an ad campaign up to then get a click to go to a page for a conversion factor to show an ROI off the one ad thing. She'll straight say that to you because she's like, that doesn't work. We've never seen it. We've never proven it. It's not. So like, we're not even selling on that. On the other hand, ask anyone who works with Mara, especially if Mara does your organic social media and your paid social media, like you get results. She's flawless at this point with any of the owners. And then we also, as a reminder, we have actually 3 recommendations for Google ad stuff too. And the reason why, it's why we go and find people that are experts in the YC, and why we have the YC experts that are slowly coming in stuff too, because we want to vet them based off our coaches' knowledge and studio owner knowledge for you guys to be like, at the very least, these people know what they're doing, understand the industry, and they're not an asshole. Like the not an asshole part is the big one, honestly, because sometimes
and they're not going to
that's
just
what you need.
disappear into the night. Like they're part of
they're
our
not taking
group,
your money and
they,
running.
Yeah, I mean, they have all the reasons to make sure that what they're doing works. And we all, it's all on our backs and our reputation. Like we're as coaches, not going to refer someone that we either haven't used or that we trust 1,000%, because, you know, I know all of us don't want someone coming back and saying, oh, you recommended so-and-so and they flaked, or they, you know, took my money and then they were gone.
I think one of the other things I wanted to add to what you're saying, Jennifer, is I think it's great. Like, I do agree, you should go and run ads yourself. But if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I've got so many things I'm doing, like, I don't want to run ads. I get it. The reason why running ads yourself is a good idea is because you're on an entrepreneurial yoga endeavor. Yoga is everything. Mastering your business is part of your yoga journey. Being an entrepreneur is the endeavor of acquiring skills and learning about skills that's like, it's a vast variety of things. But the reason why you want to acquire and get skills is so that you can effectively delegate. That's how your capacity increases. It's just like we were saying with the tone, like it can't just be your tone only, because you need to be able to translate it to somebody else so that the business does it on its own. With ads, when you go and run them yourself, whether you get a huge result or not, you'll understand enough to know what you don't understand, to know where you actually need the help. Because right now, for example, I've got an ad company that we work with, and I don't ask them for strategy advice. I don't ask them for what our ad's supposed to be. I don't ask them for the call to action. I don't ask them for what we're selling, nothing. I literally come to them and say, I put this whole ad thing together, but I want you to optimize the ad performance itself. That's it. And if you come back to me and tell me that it's purely the ad copy or the destination that's blocking it, if you can show me in numbers that that's the problem, then I'll hear what you have to say and we'll fix it. But it's because at this point for me, like, I know what I know and what I'm trying to create. I also know where there are people who are better at the technical side of tweaking things than I would be, because they spend their whole life doing that. And it's worth it for me to spend $1,500 a month with one of the companies for them to run the ads for me, because I don't have to do it then, right? Like, it increases my team's capacity and my capacity to not have that task. So it's worth it at that point. But we don't start there. And just so it's been said, a little bit of a tangent, couple ad companies, like when you're ready, we've got ad companies that are really, really good. But just so it's been said, because it sounds insane, they start at $5,000 a month for their fee, and then your ad fee on top of it. And if you go into a company like that and they're like, we want to spend $500 a month, they won't even take your call. They're like, no, we're like, we charge $5. You need to tell us we can spend a minimum of another $5 and scale it to 10 on our own accord. But those guys, they guarantee results. Now, that for most yoga studios, especially single location, that's ridiculous. You don't even need to go to that level. I'm just saying the expensive things, sometimes we're so disconnected from it. We don't know. Like, I don't know. Is it okay to spend $1,000 a month hiring a company? Could be. Not that you necessarily need to either, to the point. Last thing, and then Teresa, spin it to you as well. I think the other, the other bigger thing here with this expenditure and is the question of what should the acquisition cost be? And we don't. I will do my best, and Kay, maybe mental note for you and I, like for the coaches too, to come up with a little bit of like a guideline for that. But we see it all over the board. And, for most studios, I would say the acquisition cost is higher than you think it is to really like run ads and get people in. It's probably going to be in that $100 range in a lot of cases. But here's the weird thought that we've talked about a lot, and this is the perfect example of this conversation, right? If two people are running ads, in theory, when we look at it on an individual person basis, right? If I'm trying to get Teresa to come to my studio, if my total budget is $100,000 a month, and Alex's total budget is $100 a month, but Alex is willing to spend all 100 of those dollars to get Teresa to come to his studio, and I'm only willing to spend $20 to get Teresa to come to my studio, Alex will win in getting Teresa. It's not the total budget that wins an individual client. It's the person willing to spend the most total dollars per client, because it's an auction. It's a weird little bit of a mind twist. So the idea here is we want your acquisition cost to be low, but it's not in itself actually the most important thing to focus on at first. I think the most important thing to focus on at first is getting someone in the studio and selling them the next thing so that the money comes on the backside. Like to Vicky's point, if Vicky got whatever she said, 60 people in and 40 of them actually showed up to the studio and 10 of them bought something, maybe it is only 4 of them that ended up going through the full 6 months. But I bet you the ROI is positive then that it worked. It's a little bit slow to see that play out, but like then it did work because she has, 4 people with a $700-800 value, and the other people who bought the upfront thing makes it up. It's probably not a 2-to-1 quite yet. It's not optimized that way, but like it is in the positive. And there's the residual effect of her ads that were out there showing up in front of everyone. Go ahead there, Teresa.
I wanted to throw a couple other points out talking about ROI and measuring that. And, it's hard sometimes because there's a little bit of like, trust the universe, because you can't get super precise with the ROIs. Everything's like backlogged. Efforts that you put in now will show up, 3 to 6 months later. So, those things oftentimes will make people just, as someone mentioned earlier, just not do things like this at all. But you don't want to take that route. There's a little bit of trust the universe that goes on here. But one other point that I wanted to bring up too, that I was discussing with a client earlier this week is, it also throws another wrench into this ROI measurement thing, is those Apple privacy laws, or Apple privacy settings. So that started earlier this year. And so a lot of their actions are masked if they have those privacy settings turned on their devices. So that affects your open rates and your click rates of your email marketing efforts. And then it affects your Facebook ad results also, because if they have those settings on, you can't see if they saw your ad. And in certain cases, you can't see if they clicked on your ad. So you can't rely as much on those numbers as you did in the past because you're not seeing it all. So again, it's like you have to trust that, they'll still see your ads, they'll still click on them. You can still get a client that way, but you just won't have the concrete numbers to know. So
to that point, I would say the solution is, and Mara and I do this quite a bit, it sounds annoying, but the real solution is when you run a specific ad campaign, everything around the campaign is its own thing. So for example, you wouldn't run an ad and then put people into an email funnel that other people could also get in the email funnel. You would duplicate the email funnel, rename it the ad campaign so that the only way that someone ends up in here is because they went through this campaign. Or landing page would be another example too, or even the thing that you're selling, right? Like if we're talking about first class free, you would have it like 2022 first class free, number 1, like make it, because people are going to potentially see that name. And I know that is annoying to have to duplicate that work, but then you can say for sure, because you're right, the tracking part and like the analytics that you get off of the platforms now is not as good as it once was. And I don't even think that's a bad thing, but just the real way to track it is to separate out the whole thing.
Yeah. And remember, we've talked about it before, that it takes somebody 37 times to see an offer before they actually make a purchasing decision too. So even if they're not going through and clicking to your specific landing page, they might also be coming in next month, which is again, super frustrating. You're not going to have that concrete data, but faith.
Well, that's what Jennifer was saying before, right, with the quality of the ad is what gets her attention. That absolutely is true. What's also true, there's 2 parallel lines, is just the studio that shows up in front of you every day. Then you see it, even if they're not speaking your language in half of those times, but you see them at a high frequency, then you remember the studio, and then one of their ads does speak your language, and you actually pay attention to it because you've seen them 25 other times. Yeah. Whereas the ad copy and stuff could be brilliant, but you've never, ever seen them ever. It has to be so perfectly curated for you. And You have to be in the right mood and have the right time and like for it to really grab your attention. So there is just a pure frequency thing. Okay, I know you had more to add to this. I wanted to just add in though too, with the 3 to 6 months that Teresa was suggesting, that this gap. Think about in the industry right now, the whole industry is struggling to have first visit people come in. There are multiple reasons why that is happening. But one of the things to consider and be aware of in your marketing and advertising is if you've been shut down and you've been on low budget, and now that even you're open, you're like acting from a little bit of fear around where your spend is, and you're not putting marketing and advertising out there, and you're not getting first visit people in. Well, what have you been doing for the last 3 to 6 months? Now, I'm not saying that to like come down or talk any shit about people, but the realism of the situation is the majority of yoga studios have not been doing anything for the last 3 to 6 months to 2 years to 3 years. And then we're like surprised that no one's interested in coming in. And when we run an ad for a month and it doesn't do anything, it's like we have to warm up the whole entire environment around you to even seeing you. They have to see you a few times. Like it's going to take a minute, which is a little bit of when we're starting to look through the rest of this year and into next year. To me, for a lot of people we're coaching with, there's a little bit of like a fire under your ass right now to like get something going with your marketing and advertising, ads or whatever. It doesn't matter, because while your competitors are sleeping, you're going to show up. That's the other thing that we haven't talked about, is like your bang for your buck over your competitors is probably good right now in a lot of markets because they're not advertising. Sorry, Kay, keep going.
All right. Yeah, it's tapping into our yogic quality of patience, right? And what you get from your yoga practice, right? That you use in your business all the time in many different ways. And another, like on that note, when we work with a client in coaching, before we get to the point where we're helping you make your Facebook ads and like helping you put the money in the right place for marketing, we have to make sure that we're working on what is your first visit flow? What is your pricing? Does it back up the behavior that you want your clients to do? What is your sales process at the front desk when they come in? And all of that stuff is so, so important to make sure that when you put money out there for your marketing budget, the clients who are coming in, you're actually able to retain them, because that's what we ultimately want, right? We're not just trying to spend money on ads for fun. So that's something that we see a lot of the time is new coaching clients will come to us and be like, I just really need more new students in the door. I need to put money into marketing. And sometimes what happens is we won't be able to start with marketing. We need to start with your first visit flow and your sales. So don't get impatient and go hire the marketing company that charges you $1,000 because we haven't put that stuff in place yet. Be patient, set those systems in motion, and then we can help you set up really effective marketing campaigns.
That's actually one of the signs of a good agency, is they're going to ask you, what are you selling? What's your sales flow? Who's there? Who can pick up the lead? They're going to really drill in on all that. If they're worth their salt, that's where their questioning should start when you're talking with them. Go ahead there, Alex.
Yeah, I was thinking, I know we're talking about digital marketing and what have you, but to your point, Josh, after 2 or 3 years, people not spending money on digital marketing, and it's sort of a level set on earth that we've gone through, particularly in, yoga studios or fitness places. I'm wondering if there's a unique opportunity to kind of run parallel grassroots projects, as far as like, people like getting a letter. We've been on a screen for 2 or 3 years. We don't have this authentic connection with other, and maybe there's opportunities to really affect your community within a 5-mile radius of your location. Because sometimes, that's how I started my studio years ago. There was no digital marketing, and it was really effective, because you take the tonality of space and the leaders, the owners, the high level managers or whatever, and you take that tone from space and you have effect on your community, whether it's, the senior center or whether it's churches or whatever it is. And you, I don't know, that sometimes you have a higher level of return on investment there, because it is always hard to measure digital marketing. And when I had digital marketing, I always had somebody doing it for me. It was most effective, to Kay's point, like essentially someone in my inner circle learned the system, I paid them, and then he or she wrote it. And because the tone was set in space, it's very easy for that person to exude write it better than I would, essentially. But I don't know, there may be some opportunities to get back to grassroots,
I think it's such a great point. I was, same thing, Alex, our big studio too. We basically launched the whole thing by I printed out, I don't know, a couple thousand posters, at least, and literally walked around town myself and posted them and walked into every business and was like, hey, we're a new studio. We're doing this thing. Can I put a poster up? But it wasn't even the poster that mattered. It was me walking around the community and talking with people. The poster was the excuse to do that. Was that laborious? Yes. But did it work? Also, yes. Right. Like we were immediately selling out classes then because people find out about you. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that.
You're going local Whole Foods, you're going to the Trader Joe's. Every demographic's a little different, but we would go to the physical therapy office in the hospital. We would go to these different places and make that connection. And it definitely had an effect early on. And I think there might be some opportunity now because we're just been in so much noise,
Totally. I think it's such a good point.
Super quick. I can't help myself. I have to say, because the point that Kay brought up a couple minutes ago is so important. I just have to reiterate it. I couldn't help myself. So because sometimes people don't have those processes in place to retain those new clients when they come in. And that's such an important piece. And we spent, the last how many minutes talking about ads and how to run them and, but don't put the cart before the horse. Make sure you have all those processes in place to keep them once they come into your business, because then otherwise they'll come in and leave just as quickly as they came in. So super important.
Yeah, the funnel then becomes a cylinder rather than people coming in and leaking out. You have people coming in and pouring out. And I just wanted to say, Josh, to talk about the poster thing. I have a client who just opened her studio last month. We're still in October, yeah. And that's exactly what she did. She reached out local. She did all the things you just talked about. She's already exceeded her membership goal for the year, like in the first 2 weeks, because of all that pre-work she did. Some of her classes are almost full. So it just that boots on the ground, that tried and true guerrilla marketing practices. Didn't have a lot of money to spend on ad spends as a brand new studio. And it was just getting out, meeting and greet. She actually did what I suggested, which is the only studio that has done this. Join the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, yeah.
Joining the Chamber of Commerce, I'm going to say right now, is huge. Get involved with your local Chamber of Commerce. She's having a ribbon cutting at her studio later this month. And when you get the local chamber involved, okay, hashtag Terry's dad, right? Hashtag Terry's dad. You got to be involved in your local community. And that's a great way. These are all small businesses, all entrepreneurs from all over your community. And you got to connect with them and go to their open houses and go to the mixers, because these are the movers and shakers within your community, right? So, join your Chamber of Commerce. I know it's like an annual fee, but go to the meetings, show up, it broaden your reach. And also, to Josh's point, dudes do yoga. And so you're going to connect with not only the female entrepreneurs, you're going to connect with the male entrepreneurs as well. So hashtag Terry's dad.
Hashtag.
We have to have a hashtag Terry's dad.
It's like the idea of the Dream 100 list is how it's often referred to. It's not about that concept has been misutilized in marketing as of late, where people think of like, oh, you only need 100 clients to grow your business or whatever. And that's not actually what that's talking about. The idea is you need 100 people of influence. That's who you're going after. So Chamber would be an example to what your point is, Terry. Like, it doesn't matter if that person you talk to, 100 raving fans, exactly. Jennifer is just posting in the comments. It doesn't matter if you get the actual other business owners in that instance to come in and practice or not. You need to get them talking about you is the big one. I wanted to go back to one of the things Teresa was doubling down on with having this process in place too. And this is, Vicky had to jump and get a train, but I'm totally bringing her up to have this conversation too. When you get a lead, here's one thing that yoga studios, in my experience, like it's not like not many of them have this, literally almost none. The percentage is extremely low. We have historically, because of how it's gone in the market, looked at a lead as someone who comes in to take a first class. That's not a lead. That's someone that's a first visit person. So yeah, first visit flow, sales process there, conversion of intro to whatever else. Yes, 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 yes. But the question becomes, if you run an ad campaign and you get 100 leads who have not taken a class yet, how are you getting them to class? How are you selling them before? That's why the first class free concept works, is that you get the contact person, you get the contact of the person in the opt-in, and you have to go after that. And it sounds like something that we might not love to do, but it's a simple math equation. If I get 100 leads and Terry gets 100 leads, and I phone every single one of those leads, not once, not 3 times, 10. If I don't get them on the phone, even in the class, I'm going to phone every one of them 10 times. I'm going to make 1,000 phone calls and send them emails and a text message. And Terry gets the same 100 leads, and all they get is 1 text and 1 email. At the end of the year, who's going to have more people? Like, if you're going to pick the winning racehorse to put your money on. Now, there's some specific, details in there, but I would just say you really have to consider, and right now in time more than ever, that there is a significant amount of effort and focus and development of a system that must take place prior to arrival to your studio. We've gotten away with not having to do that in the past. That's not going to be, it's not what it is now, and it won't be like that moving forward. The hard part for your students is getting to the studio. Once they're there, they're already, yes, you've already got them. Still, you have to have all those other systems and stuff in place, but like, there's a whole new plan and system and SOP that's got to be there, and a team running on that, or you're just going to have more struggle than necessary, I would suggest. Wow.
Jennifer,
okay.
Jennifer, did you want to say something about retention on that note?
Yeah, I was going to riff off of something that's free that I've been working on in my own studio. I like to kind of do case studies of stuff. And now I'm working on it with one of my coaching clients. So it's the idea of reminding your students when they're in classes, and working with your teachers to remind students to register for their next class before they leave your space. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that feels a little overwhelming. Like, if you don't have a front desk staff, like that's my front desk person, that's one of her KPIs, and how she's bonused is the number of people who are registered before they leave class. But for teachers, one of the ways that I've been testing it out myself is I only teach 1 class a week right now. And what I've been doing is saying, okay, for today's class, we're working on, engagement of the glute med or whatever we're working on. And we do poses that support that. And next week, we're going to be working on quadricep engagement and hamstring lengthening, or Warrior 3, or whatever we're working on. Make sure you sign up before you leave today for next week, because we're going to be building on that, and you don't want to miss how these 2 things work together. So I've had so many more students sign up, say before they leave, or they say, oh, am I signed up for next week? Or can you get me, I didn't even know I could do a recurring reservation in Mindbody. So it's that talk of accountability, and the why behind it that I think is really important is kind of twofold. So we think about, we have kind of, two clients, I would say. We have the business, and we have our customers or our students. So for the business, it's because we know that the more people practice and we get them into the practice of yoga, and have the accountability for them, the longer they're going to stay, because they're going to start to see the benefits of the practice. And the why for our customers or our students is just to take one thing off your plate. I know you got a lot going on. Do you want me to just register you? Then you won't even have to worry about it. You'll be all registered for next week. And very rarely does anybody say no. And they are kind of liking this idea where they're learning something and they're building off of it, and they kind of know what to expect the following week. I mean, I even make it funny sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, if you hated how long we held Warrior today, don't worry, next week there's going to be something you hate just as much. So come back next week and find out what it is. So it's free. But it's just kind of conversation that gets in. It really ties back into the Soulful Sales that Josh has hosted, and it brings you back into that idea of sales and it not being a slimy process. It benefits everybody. So that's just my little tip that I've been using, and it's been really fun and effective. So feel free to try it out and let us know how it works.
This is such a good tip, Jennifer. And we did that at our studio too. And we saw it as like customer service. This is, as you're leaving, we want everybody who comes in to feel like we're so happy to see them, right? So what could be better than feeling like people want to see you again and they just can't wait to see you when you are leaving? So we would ask, when are we going to see you again? Like, let me get you signed up for your next class. Like, that feels so good to people because they come into your studio to be seen. And that, like, you can't value that even, like, just somebody saying that they want to see you again when you're leaving. So that can be really, really, really impactful for people, and helps them, come to the next class.
But to your point too, both you guys, if you can tie that into, like, one thing that yoga studios don't have, like a karate studio does, or like a gym does, or whatever, is we don't have like attaboys, basically, or girls, like the things that you accomplish, right? So in your case, you're building like a series of sequence of stability or what have you, flexibility. And so there's these accomplishments that you're speaking to. And if you pair that with the accountability of it, when you're going to come into class, it feels like, to Jen's point, it's like they're getting something, but you're getting them in, and together you're building towards something.
Yeah, and you could do that easily, like with Warriors. This week we're focusing on Warrior
Right.
1. Come back next week, we got Warrior 2 coming your way. So, people, it's really just that it's hitting all of the things that you guys have said. And, I think it's important to, think about things that we can do that don't cost a lot of money that are also very effective.
Well, and that's why challenges have worked well over the years in studios, but they're only twice a year or what have you. But if you have sort of integral challenges built into the class structure to some extent, or some specific classes, it just keeps the students like engaged, right? They get the higher touch kind of points,
Yeah, I love both of these concepts. There's so many other ways to spin this as well. Like we did, a monthly yoga posture and created a video on it and a breakdown or whatever else. But you could do exactly now without everything tooled up. Like there could be a video and a couple posts on social media, as well as it's talked about in class. At like this week, we're focusing on Warrior 1. And then you're being like, hey, let me sign you up for next week. We should have a recurring sign, it all starts to fit together. The puzzle pieces start to fit together. But the simple starting point, going back to Jennifer's point, is just do the easy stuff that's available to you. The one thing to sort of close us off for the end of time today that I think is fascinating is this idea of cost and expense. There's been a big part of the conversation today. So looking at it from the perspective of like, oh, there's a big expense in dollars for me to hire an agency to run ads. And then there's the ad expense itself. And I don't know what the ROI on that is. Well, there's also an expense if you don't do that. There's a cost, like an opportunity cost for not doing that, one. And two, if you don't do that, what are you doing that makes up the same amount of impact? And it doesn't have to cost you dollars, but it's going to cost you effort, time, training, standard operating procedure, development, following up, like tracking on results, whatever. There's always a cost somewhere. So even the word cost, we have to change our paradigm around it being a negative thing. It's just the realism of running the business, and how it appears will be different based on what you're trying right now and what you want to do. That's why it's important to be in the YC to continue these conversations. We do the weekly roundup, obviously, every week, every Friday, but it's stored as well in the free version. So for those of you who are seeing this, if you have not joined the Yogapreneur Collective, go to theyogapreneurcollective.com. Also, the link is down below on this YouTube video, if you're watching it there, for you to jump in. It's free to be part of the conversation as long as you are a yoga entrepreneur. If you are not a yoga entrepreneur, sorry, we will boot you out. But that's neither here nor there. And then if you are in the YC, just remember that you have the coaches here to support you. So both in the conversation and the resources and the videos and stuff that we have and all the lessons, but also in one-on-one coaching. When we're talking about marketing, advertising, getting ready, going to the next thing, go to any coach's profile and there's a free call for you to meet them and chat with them. But the impact of coaching is exponential. And here's the interesting data point that I just uncovered. I'll do a post in the YC about this probably later today. The industry of yoga has seen about 30% of studios close over the last 3 years of time. People who were in certain organizations and groups where they were focused on curating a better environment and working on their business, we're seeing around 20%. So like people in the YC generically, it's only around 20% that we're seeing closure. So just the fact that they're paying attention to their business lowered the closure rate. 0 people who were on one-on-one coaching closed. I went back and looked. 0, none. So I'm not saying that to like toot our horn, though of course I am a little bit. It's more around the difference between a studio that crushes it and one that struggles is the owner's ability to take action and to just actually like go for it on this stuff in some way. So there's your pep talk for Friday. Have a great weekend. Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns. How would we do this? How do you do that? Post them down below. We do look at them. We will get back to them and we'll make future videos answering the questions as well to go through it. That's it for now.
Go do yoga.
Happy weekend.
Peace.